Hi, Sam. Good to see you.
Hi, Dirk. How are you?
Very good. Oh, my word. You've still got the TEDxLuxembourgCity coffee mug.
Of course, one of my most precious possessions. I use it almost daily.
Fantastic. So you came to do a TED Talk with us, I think that's 2 years ago now. Is that right?
2018. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was around June, I think, in 2018. And at that time, we had these TEDxLuxembourgCity mugs, which I've managed not to break mine. So fortunately, you have as well, apparently. That's wonderful.
That's right.
So Sam, I'll just quickly introduce you to the audience, and for those that haven't seen your TED Talk, and I would certainly, by the way, again, recommend that people watch your TED Talk because it was really, really fascinating. What I'll do is I'll just kind of underneath this video in the description put a link to your TED Talk so that people can go and watch it. But so we asked you at the time because we love to engage different industries at a TED Talk, at a TED event. And so at TEDx Luxembourg City, we thought, right, we'd love to engage a charity of some sort. And at the time, the team immediately said, how about MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières? So Doctors Without Borders. And we knew that you guys have a good presence in Luxembourg. And of course, you work in Luxembourg. So we reached out to you and you came and said yes. So thank you very much. But so would you care to just maybe continue to describe what is it that you do at MSF?
Sure, with pleasure. I work as a policy practice and communication advisor with MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders in English, as you said. That's a long job title, so as such already requires some explanation. I work with a team of operational researchers. So we do research in humanitarian medical projects all around the world. MSF, I think that might be fairly well known, works in many difficult, hard to access, very poor, low resource contexts where there's a lot of health issues, a lot of challenges on the ground. And very often our teams on the ground, so the doctors, the coordinators, our national staff, they face issues or challenges that they are wondering, how can we improve this? How can we better understand what's happening here? And so very often they have kind of research requests, so analysis that needs to be done, evidence that needs to be generated. And our team helps these people conduct that research. In my role as an advisor, I help translating the findings of this research back into what's called policy and practice. So where possible, we try to move what we find into policy, into guidelines, into legislation. And very often in our own projects, we realize, hey, wait, here is something that we found that we actually can do better. Let's change the way we deliver care. Let's change the way we do, for example, vaccination campaigns. And I help doing this with a fairly wide range of tools, reaching from communication, training, health promotion, advocacy, and so on.
And so do you go out there to these difficult places where you're working?
I do get out there every now and then. I always say not as much as I would like to, because it's really essential and amazing to go to these places, to work with the staff on the ground, to work with the communities and the patients. But yes, I have been traveling quite a lot. The second half of last year alone, 4 different countries, including Zimbabwe, Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa, and also Nepal. So like very different places. And it's one of the really most interesting sides of my work, and the great privilege to travel around so much and to see these different places and work with all these people.
And one of the things that really got to me about your TED Talk was obviously working at a university, we do a fair amount of research, and I guess the constant criticism, especially about traditional university research, is, you know, we do the research, we put it out there in journals, and then they get read by 2 or 3 people. So that it's peer reviewed, which is great because there we actually get some feedback. But then after that, it's just kind of published, and it sort of lives out there in this space with interest from a very, very small section of people. But your research, the research that you run is, I mean, it's quite literally life or death. The results cause life or death, and you kind of highlighted some of those issues, and I thought that was incredibly fascinating. I mean, do you have an example or two of the kind of research that you've done, which has changed the way that people see things or gone about things?
I can think of a few examples. I will say first, though, that having a research and university and academic background on my own, I very much am familiar with these, well, let's call it accusations of not really making a difference. And whether it's at university or at a more operational level that I'm working in now, I think it's also an accusation that is often a bit short-sighted. I mean, there is real value in academic research, in creating knowledge and in sharing it within academic or other research circles. And it's not always as easy and straightforward to just say, okay, this really needs to change something in practice or on the ground. On the other hand, yes, that was part of the reason. And I think if I remember right, that's one of the points I made in my TED talk as well, where I kind of, at some point in my academic career, felt uncomfortable, or rather felt I want to get out there and I want to do something differently. The work I do now, and I'm happy to give you one or two examples, is more practical in that sense. However, we still face the same challenges. And the key point here is that research or evidence, no matter how strong or how compelling, does just not automatically lead to change. It takes translation, communication, moving forward, convincing people, getting to the right actors, the right stakeholders, and so on. So I still face the same challenges, and hands down, we still have research projects where we have evidence, or we try it, and it's just not that easy, be it because we don't have access, be it because it's not a priority, be it there's a political issue. It's very tricky. I've recently worked in, I've mentioned Zimbabwe, where I've been last in December, where I've been working with a environmental health team. So that's a team that focuses on groundwater and waste management mostly. And we've, over 2 years now, developed a kind of toolkit that includes various things, better drilling techniques to get access to safe drinking water, but also a community health club approach that engages local communities in managing different water points. So we had various research studies around that. I kind of delivered the evidence, and now we've translated that into some communication pieces, but also into a digital toolkit, so like a manual everybody can access online. And that's really something where you could see from the start and the research, strong evidence, to like practically now other people, other organizations, and other MSF actors in surrounding countries like Mozambique and Malawi picking it up. Right. So that's very tangible, and one of the, it's not all of them, it may even be rare, but that's a case where we really could see concrete uptake of our research findings, and it's a fantastic thing to witness, really.
Right. Well, that's incredible. So considering where we are now, and since the pandemic outbreak, how has that changed things? And in fact, has MSF gotten involved in any particular way, or have you personally been involved in any particular way?
It's a very good question, and kind of a tricky one to answer, because I can answer it on many different levels. But maybe first, yes, of course, it has changed everything. First and foremost, working for MSF as an organization, we are quite used to working with epidemics, with infectious diseases. Maybe less so at this like global pandemic scale, but we have a lot of experience with this kind of things. It is, however, rare, and you will see from my answers before, usually you travel somewhere, right? You fly a long distance. In September, I was in DRC in the middle of an active Ebola transmission zone. That's different because it's more with touching, and fluids need to get in touch, so you don't have this droplet transmission that is likely the case for the COVID pandemic. But still, it's a similar setting. However, you fly there, you leave your things at home, you go there. Now all of a sudden, we face this at home here, literally on our doorstep. In Europe. And while we're certainly privileged, most of us, to have very strong health systems, we have already seen that this pandemic has brought a lot of our health infrastructure and health systems to the bare knees. So it's like very limited. So that changes. And yes, that means for MSF, we do work in Europe with some other projects, mostly around migrant health, and we have done so even before. But now we do concrete support to hospitals or retirement homes, to homeless populations and more fragile populations in European countries all around. Not Luxembourg so far, but all surrounding countries, France, Belgium, Spain, Portugal, Italy certainly, where we had several projects in hospitals. So that's the first thing that kind of changes. We get involved in this outbreak response, obviously, and we help wherever we can. The second, and maybe more related to my other work, is that we are extremely concerned about the more the populations we work with in humanitarian settings in general. So this is happening right now. This outbreak is going to affect countries that have by far not such strong health systems that we have, countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and so on. And we're extremely concerned how people and how the health systems will deal with it there. There is even the more extreme case of the refugee or migrant populations. If you think of the refugee migration camps on the Greek islands or in Bangladesh, for example, where a lot of people live in these like makeshift camps, very close to each other, no health infrastructure whatsoever. So we're kind of really working fast-paced now to prepare, to inform people how they can protect themselves as much as is possible. Of course, this is far from the well-equipped reality that we face here. And then maybe lastly, of course, for the research agenda and operational research agenda, we're only at the beginning. We're now starting to see first requests on like how do we do surveillance of these cases in our own hospitals, in our own projects. What kind of data will we collect? What kind of evidence gaps are there? Obviously, the entire machinery of public health research is working at fast track on this, but we have our own questions, and we're slowly starting to get involved in that as well.
And do you work across many organizations? Because of course, you know, there are so many organizations involved with this, and from a third-party perspective, it's not super clear as to, you know, clearly there's a World Health Organization which infamously Trump has recently said he's going to stop funding from the US, and so that's obviously drawn a lot of questions. Well, has the WHO failed everybody? But is it not the case that this is an organization that's pulling together a lot of organizations and sort of creating a central database for the research that's done across other NGOs, but then also private companies and so forth? I know the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are one of the primary contributors to the WHO. So what's your experience with that?
Maybe less about WHO, but in general, and that includes WHO as well, I really think partnership and close partnership is the only way to successfully respond to this outbreak and to kind of move forward and overcome some of the challenges. No organization, including MSF, can beat this alone. That's out of the question. So in all our projects around the world, we always work as much as possible and always independently and in a mutual way with all the actors. Our interest is usually the patients, the communities we work with. And to help them, again, partnership is inevitable and is the only way forward. There is, of course, the other side to it, that in many places where MSF works, there are not that many other actors around. So you may not find like the big selection of actors you may face in Europe, in a remote place in any country in Africa or in Asia or in South America. So that's a bit different. But wherever possible, yes, of course, we collaborate. And on the evidence side, in fact, we have just started recently to kind of put together and publish some of the guidance that we at MSF developed. So that we're talking really practical medical guidance, some decisions we need to take, and to make this available publicly exactly to partners and other health actors, because we really believe in this kind of collaborative approach to responding to these challenges.
So considering where you're typically involved, clearly now your MSF finds itself more in Europe, but as you pointed out, these, you know, there are these areas in the world that haven't yet seen the full force of this pandemic, but it's expected to come along. And I think in a a recent interview with Bill Gates, he pointed out, you know, there was that initial surge in China and Wuhan, but then there was this second sort of stage where countries that are fairly well off are dealing with it and have fairly good health systems. But he anticipates potentially what could be the worst case, which is countries that don't have such well-established healthcare systems. And I guess these are the countries that you're talking about as well. You have a lot of exposure to. Do you see that being as dire, potentially dire, as people are saying?
I wouldn't dare to make like, to call like out on predictions that strongly. I hope not. I think.
Is it something that governments should take an active interest in stopping? So governments of well-off nations, do you think this is, everybody has a role to play in anticipating that this is going to happen, and people should do something about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. And I do think, and if nothing else, that's what this pandemic shows very clearly, is like the global impact of this, like really the widespread consequences that we see. And yes, I do think we have a responsibility to respond and to help out in places where health systems and infrastructure are not as strong and well developed as they are here. It's unfortunately, I will say now on a side note, and my point is it really shouldn't be a side note, just because of this pandemic. Of course, it does not mean that all the other health issues that we constantly fight in these countries are not actually persisting and might even get worse now that the focus shifts away. If you think, especially in like tropical countries, if you think of like malaria, if you think of measles, if you think of cholera, all the different infectious diseases these are massive health issues that persist. And we have first modelings and predictions. And it's an interesting question. And for example, that relates to my TED talk as well. If you think now, what about measles vaccinations? Because if you do measles vaccination in, let's say, DRC, for example, the risk is, of course, that you have a lot of children, a lot of families coming together to the vaccination site, and you could potentially create a place or a spot of transmission for the coronavirus. However, we have, and that's why many actors, and us included in some places, stopped these activities for now to be on the safe side. We now have modelings that say the risk for one child that risks to get coronavirus, you have about 128 that then risk to get measles, which is very dangerous later on over the next 5 years. So it's too early to like predict and say, but what is for certain is that they are extremely high risks, it's extremely a lot of health issues at stake here. And we definitely have to contribute all to overcome these over the next years, I fear. Yeah.
Yeah, as you say, that's a side note here, but in fact, that's something that really needs to be considered and is not being covered by media, and it's not seemingly not a concern right now. Whenever we switch television on, so just to finalize, do you have a final message that you would like to give the audience? Because I mean, the audience here is typically TED fans, and I think they're very used to watching something and having a takeaway. So what would you want to give as your takeaway to the audience?
To me, as a suggested takeaway message, and I realize this may sound a bit strange coming from someone that, as I said, spent a lot of the last few weeks in his own apartment. But my advice and my message really is, or what I would like for people to take away, is to see or try and see things more in perspective. The attention that this pandemic has gotten in the media, the kind of stress levels that have been discussed in the media here. So anything which are, don't get me wrong, serious issues, people being confined at home, your supermarket not being as stocked as usual, and so on. These are all serious issues. However, and I know this may sound simple, but a lot of the places we work in and some of the places I have been to over the last few years, these are luxury problems, to say the least. I mean, we really work, there's populations in the world, there's people in the world that have way less at hand to deal with this kind of crisis that we have. So I really think it is worth looking kind of across our own cultural setting, our own direct neighborhoods, and try and deal with this together as much as possible. That will be my key takeaway.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. And thanks for taking the time to sit down and have a coffee with me.
Thank you very much for calling in.
And I hope to talk again with you soon.
Same here. Thank you
By
very
the way,
much.
congratulations once more, because I understand you have a new addition to the family at home.
That's right. Yes, in the middle of all of this, we very recently had, or my partner had our second baby. Yes, that's right. We're very happy.
If I'm not mistaken, your first baby came shortly after your TED Talk originally.
It does seem to my family, in one way or another, it does seem to evolve around the Luxembourg TEDx event. Yes, and speaking to you. Yes.
So clearly, one of your kids' names is Ted. No, not yet.
No, not yet. No, not yet.
The third child.
You never know. We can consider. Yeah.
Sam, thank you very, very much for taking the time. I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Same here. Thank you very much.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.